As a responsible person with growing concerns for your privacy and personal liberty, you want to know where we're headed and what you can do about it. We ask the experts what you need to do to take prudent and responsible action to safeguard your family's wealth and well-being, and what basic first steps will help you to be aware and prepared. ReluctantPreppers.com.
What would it look like in a precarious, high-risk situation prior to a collapse militarily on a global basis? And are there things that we're seeing, signs of the times going on, whether it's from ISIS or nuclear Iran or North Korea ICBM tests or militarization of police? What do you consider to be the key destabilizing or high-risk areas militarily right now?
Well, I don't know if this is key, but I think it's very, very indicative of how far gone the military is. How about if you have a military that says, you know what, we're going to send women into combat? How about a military that says we're going to have transvestites in the military? How about that? For starters, I think the key with regards to the American military is that, first of all, it has been utterly purged of real men who were loyal to the service oath to preserve, protect, and defend the Constitution from all enemies, foreign and domestic. They've gotten rid of all of those guys long since. What's left from field grade all the way up? I mean, the flag officer thing has been a complete loss for decades and decades. But now you can even say from the rank of major all the way up, all the field grade officers too. They've purged anyone out of there who has any interest in personal integrity, loyalty to the Constitution, or thinking that their service oath means anything. Those guys are all gone. And so now this business of saying we're going to have women in combat, we're going to have women SEALs, we're going to have females go through the BUDS program, you're out of your mind. This is so detached from reality. I mean, just a minuscule fraction of men can get through the BUDS program, BUDS training to be a Navy SEAL. There is not, and nor has there ever been a female alive who could perform physically on that level. It's utterly irrational. It is completely detached from reality. It's just us saying, well, women can do anything men can do. Women are just as strong as men. No, they aren't. You're insane. You are categorically insane if you say that and you actually believe that. I mean, this is on par. It's basically the same thing as Bruce Jenner declaring himself, I am now a female and my name is Caitlyn. No, you're a man in makeup. You're a man who has gone and mutilated himself and had false silicone breasts implanted. You're a man. That is how God made you. Every cell in your body contains an X and a Y chromosome. You are a man. And if you say anything other than that, you are detached from reality. You are, by definition, insane. These ideas are insane. And so with the military, we've descended into this insanity. They have no interest, clearly, in winning any wars. They are, we see this now. We have this proof text now of Putin, moving into the Syrian theater and the Middle Eastern theater and just kicking ass all over the place. Well, of course he is. Who are you fighting? You're fighting a bunch of inbred, mentally retarded, ragtag, quote unquote, militia, disorganized, unorganized, ragtag, mentally retarded militia. Do you not think that there's something wrong that the United States military, which is still on paper the most technologically powerful and powerful by size military on the face of the earth and that has ever existed? Does it not strike you as odd that we've been engaged basically since 2001 in these theaters against these people, And we just keep having our boys come home dead in boxes, and it's this grind. And let's be honest, we're getting our asses kicked. Why is that? It's because we're not actually fighting to win. There's no engagement. There's no engagement or interest with victory in any way. It's just all this psychopathic political wrangling, and let's face it, also feeding the military-industrial complex. It's all completely psychopathic. There's no interest in victory at all. And so morale is just as low as I suppose it could possibly go. Why are so many of our boys coming home and committing suicide? You know why? Because they are put into these theaters and they are made to interact with and told that they are allied with men who they see having sex with each other, men who they see raping little boys. And then the American soldiers are explicitly told, you are forbidden from stopping them from raping the little boys. You're forbidden from saying anything about this. Do you know what that does to the human mind? These people then, these men and sometimes women, come home and they have been exposed to things and they have been told that they are allied with a culture that is so thoroughly evil that they then descend themselves into depression and then eventually suicide. They are so scandalized and so despairing after having been in the United States military and being in the Middle East and being told to do these things, don't win, and we're here to support this boy raping culture, this satanic culture. Yeah, those are your allies. I mean, of course they come home and they have a high suicide rate. So morale is lower than I think it's probably ever been. It's ever been in the United States military. And I don't know, I'd have to be pretty hard pressed to think of an historical analog to that where men were made to go and fight in almost a suicidal way. We want to build up the people who have expressly state on a daily basis that they want to then come overthrow our country, kill all of us, and rape all of our women and children. This is who we're fighting for. This suicidal psychopathy. I think that's a pretty good indicator too, that you're at the end of your tether with regards to military capability.
Now, you also mentioned in there about those who were really interested in upholding the Constitution and their true mission of the soldier servant being purged out. If we could turn our attention to constitutionality in the political realm, is there any branch of the federal government left that is upholding the Constitution?
Clearly not. Obviously not.
Can you expound on examples specifically from each branch, from the executive on, of where it's clearly abandoned upholding the Constitution?
The executive branch has been usurped by an Indonesian national who is clearly explicitly allied with Islam, was instrumental in reforming the caliphate in connection with the Muslim Brotherhood, and also has connections to Saudi Arabia. He's all over the place in the Muslim world. He has connections to Saudi Arabia, and that goes back before him, obviously. Obviously. We don't need to go down that rabbit hole, but yes, let me just make sure that I make that clear. He has connections to Pakistan. He has connections to Iran. The summer of 2009, I knew exactly what they were going to do, that they were looking to reform the caliphate when there was that people's revolution in I believe it was July of 2009. Millions and millions and millions of Persians in the street in Iran, ready to overthrow, ready to topple the Ayatollahs, and ready to topple that Shiite theocratic regime. And all they needed was one word of support from Washington, D.C., and nothing. And so it all fell apart, and the Ayatollahs then became more powerful than ever. I mean, it was obvious what was going to happen. The destabilization of the intentional destabilization of both Egypt and, of course, Libya, getting Gaddafi out of there, setting up the weapons beachhead at Benghazi, installing Chris Stevens, who was CIA there, and then running weapons to the Muslim Brotherhood through Benghazi. Then, for whatever reason, the White House literally executing Chris Stevens. That was a hit, pure and simple. All of his security was withdrawn. The Muslim Brotherhood was tipped off as to where he would be and what route he was taking. A drone was put above to surveil everything, and they sat there and they watched. They sat there in the White House and they watched as their contract on Chris Stevens was executed. We're talking about 250 inbred, mentally retarded or borderline mentally retarded ragtag militia who were only a few clicks south of the United States naval base at Sigonella. You're telling me that, there's no way, there was nothing that the United States military, there was nothing that could have come out of Sigonella that could have helped that situation at all. That is the most imbecilic argument I think I've ever heard in my life. And I heard a major in the United States Army make that very claim. And then after he got finished making that claim, he said, look, I just need to make it 8 more years until I get my pension. And I was like, yep, that's all that matters to you, isn't it? That's all that matters to you. It doesn't matter what's true. It doesn't matter what the Constitution is. It doesn't matter what the rule of law is. All that matters is that you get your freaking pension, Major. I hope he's listening. My contempt for men like that is boundless. Those are the men who history will look back and say, you were at the front lines. You had taken an oath. You had taken a solemn oath to preserve, protect, and defend the Constitution of your country from all enemies, foreign and domestic, and all you cared about was your pension. Despicable. If that is what the men in the United States are made of, if that's the fiber, if that's the cultural fiber of men in the United States, then the United States deserved to be overthrown. It deserved it.
So we'll get into that more when we talk about moral edge of collapse of our culture in the next section.
Oh, but I should talk about the other 2 branches of government. Okay, so the executive branch is overthrown. Legislative branch, how many years did we go without a budget?
And raising the debt limit.
It was, how many years was it? 7, 8 years? No budget. All there was continuing resolutions. That's a crime. That's treason. And raising the debt limit over and over and over and over again. It's, capitulating to the executive at every possible turn. And then, of course, the judicial, obviously, the Supreme Court, just, making laws up. The Obamacare, Roberts writing both sides of the Obamacare ruling, the legislating from the bench and all. It's insane. It's absolutely insane. It's everywhere. No one will stand up. No one will say anything. No one will put their career on the line, including, may he rest in peace. But I wrote against Scalia. I wrote against Scalia and saying if he really had the courage of his convictions, he would resign. He would resign from the Supreme Court and say, this is a farce. I can no longer continue to participate in this and lend legitimacy to it by my participation. This is why I declared a tax strike. This is why of course I'm not going to vote. People ask me, who are you voting for? Vote for what? In what country? Vote in what country? The United States has been overthrown. There is no one to vote for. It's not the constitutional republic of the United States anymore. If I vote in that, if I sit around and comment on this farce of these political campaigns and these presidential elections, if I even comment on that, I am lending legitimacy to the paradigm itself. And my core premise is that it doesn't exist anymore. It was overthrown. Who do you like? Do you like Trump or Cruz? They're both psychopaths. You know how I can tell? Because they're running for president of the United States. The United States was overthrown. It no longer exists. This is all a farce. Anyone who would want to have anything to do with that godforsaken cesspit in Washington, D.C., anyone who would voluntarily engage that is psychologically and morally unfit to hold public office, period. Internal consistency, yeah.
So in areas like that, where do you see the abandonment of the rule of law? You mentioned rule of law a few minutes ago, and when you have leaders, especially the most at the highest level, just brazenly and with impunity, just sidestepping any evidence that they're going to be held accountable or held to the rule of law, whether it's Clinton regarding Benghazi or anything else, whether it's Obama making executive orders that far outstrip and appointing czars and all that. If there's actual law breaking going on at the highest level, then the word is out. Then it seems to be to the population that we are no longer a governed, ordered society subject to the rule of law. Is that the right way to assess that?
Oh, absolutely. The rule of law is dead. And again, tying everything back together, what completely and totally informed me on this, it actually wasn't the Obama usurpation, although that was huge. The final nail in the coffin for me was, of course, the MF Global theft. Okay, there is clearly no rule of law left in this landmass. It's over. And so, yes, the signal that all of this sends to these diabolical narcissist psychopath oligarchs is that these people out here, all 330 million of them, they are all completely whipped. And you can do anything to them, anything, and they're not going to so much as lift a finger back against you because they are so effeminate and they are so whipped. Do you want to know what now the solution to this problem, not just in the former United States, but all over the Western world, Europe, North America, all of it. There's only one way out of this now, and that is war. Violent, hot war. One of the reasons why I started screaming and yelling years and years and years ago is because we still had time. We still had time to avert war. We still had time as a people to engage in mass civil disobedience and to right the ship, correct the course, and get back on track. 8 years ago, there was hope. There is no longer any hope. That ship sailed. What has now happened is that we are now absolutely guaranteed that the only way this can be corrected, that this can be fixed, is through war. These people are going to have to be physically removed from power, and that is going to involve war. Civil war, and again, this is why talking about unprecedented and signs of global catastrophic collapse. This is another unprecedented dynamic. There's going to be a world war. It's obvious there's going to be a world war with regards to, the Muslims invading Europe, destabilization, just all over the planet, the Korean Peninsula, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Couple that with economic collapse, and then what you get is you're going to have simultaneous world war and civil war. This has never happened before. In the United States, in the first Civil War, it was actually relatively simple because there was the Mason-Dixon line. There was a physical line that you could look at on a map and say, okay, north of here, you're on one side, south of here, you're on the other. That's not what this is going to be. Every urban center of any size is going to be its own discrete theater all over the world. every city is going to be a theater of not just civil war, but then also at the same time, there's going to be world war of region against, I mean, I don't even know if you can call it nation states anymore, of just region against region. The Muslims invading Europe, Russia moving against, whoever Russia is interested in invading, be it Eastern Europe, be it Russia moving down back into the Middle East. China, where are they going to go? Do they want to invade Japan? What are their plans? What do they intend to do? And so with the economic collapse, you have simultaneous world civil war and world nation state or regional war. It's completely unprecedented. And you can just see it unfolding in slow motion in front of us day by day. Oh, here comes the next step. Here comes the next step. Here comes the next step.
And in the face of that, you're pointing out that we have a population that has been conditioned and trained and miseducated through political correctness and other forces to be so averse to engaging, to fighting the good fight, to standing up for themselves, for their children, even for their unborn children, that there's not the demonstration, that there's the fiber and the courage, the fortitude to stand up in an organized way or with a cultural strength of tradition or whatever, because we've been so lulled into dependency, servitude, and the culture of nice that people, and just distracted, as you mentioned, you were criticizing military officers too distracted by their pensions, but aren't we all subject to that same temptation, is to be so subject to our accommodation to comfort, convenience, and all the fruits of the 747, as you put it earlier, that the culture that would, of the rugged individuals.
The man. I mean, make it even simpler than that. The man. There are no more men. Masculinity itself has been utterly purged from Western civilization, and you can even, I don't hesitate to attach this label to it, to all of the white cultures in the world. There's not the rampant effeminacy in the non-white cultures throughout the world that there is in Europe and in North America, especially in Europe and North America. All masculinity has been purged. Never before in history have men been so flaccid and even suicidal. Never before have men taken no personal pride in providing for women and children, in defending women and children. And we see this with the mass sexual assaults that are going on in these invaded territories of Europe, in Germany and in Scandinavia, where Musloids are just running wild and literally sexually assaulting and raping women on the street in front of the men. In front of the men. And the men stand there and watch. They cannot even defend their own women. They cower in fear. Never before in human history do we have a population of, if you put Europe and North America together, you're talking about in excess of 1 billion people. Never before in human history have we seen a population so large, so utterly purged of masculinity or any desire to defend itself or perpetuate itself. The entire mindset is suicidal. These people, these white cultures in Europe and North America, they can't even be bothered to reproduce. They are so self-loathing and so narcissistic and so self-absorbed. All they care about is their own personal decadence and material surroundings, to the point where they can't even be bothered to reproduce because, well, that children cost money. And we'd rather have the disposable income for ourselves and not even reproduce. That mindset, and I know it's hard for a lot of your listeners to believe this because this contraceptive mentality is so thoroughly ingrained in the American culture that you can't even believe that having lots of children and perpetuating not only the species in general, but your own DNA up until now, up until within the last less than a century, 50 years, having lots of kids and perpetuating your DNA was like one of the top priorities in life. It was one of the top priorities in culture to have lots of kids and perpetuate. And that's completely lost. We just don't even have any interest in that anymore. Can't be bothered.
And you're leading us into exactly where I wanted to go next, which is the moral verge of collapse of society, or the presence of collapse. Actually, you mentioned earlier when you were talking about the lack of virile men. The word virtue has the same Latin root, vir, which means manly, powerful, and courageous. And so we're talking about the lack of virility. Is what you've been talking about in the past. Let's shift that to talking about the lack of virtue and how those two are inextricably linked. We certainly have had as part of the sexual revolution, you mentioned contraceptive mentality, just the scourge of pornography and dependence on it, the number one dark industry that really built the internet, they say, from a financial standpoint. Yeah. But it's so corrosive to not only the anybody who participates in it or is related to anyone who participates in it, whether it's the marriage relationships or the family relationships, the role modeling, the thought process. And you mentioned men indulging in their self gratification rather than saying, I laid down my life sacrificially. I know you and I are both Roman Catholic, and the idea of following the one model of Jesus Christ as the ultimate example of manliness, of being able to be a sacrificial servant leader. So what has the sexual revolution, abortion on demand, done to led us to on the precipice of collapse? How does that play together? You were already going into that. I just want to share one anecdote. Was our trip to Washington, D.C. We were standing outside, actually waiting in line to get into the Bureau of Engraving and Printing, and right around the corner from there is the Holocaust Museum. Engraved into the stone wall of the outside of the Holocaust Museum, I don't have the exact quote, but it's something to the extent that the world should never forget, that these atrocities should never happen again. And I thought, how utterly ironic is it that I'm in Washington, D.C. with Obama as president, the most pro-abortion president we've ever had, and then all these litany of Planned Parenthood expose videos that have come out over the past half year showing the butchering and sale of unborn babies' body parts,
preborn
and then the legal system, the machinery of the legal system, the Justice Department coming out to prosecute and to criminally prosecute those who are the whistleblowers about the truth. Rather than the atrocity that's going on. The irony just seems inescapable where this leads us to morally. So if you could just address a bit further, where are we at? What would the hallmarks of a society that's in a pre-collapse state, either from history, or what would you see, the writing on the wall that says that the moral fabric of society is broken down, and where do you see that happening in our society?